Hello, this is Mark with the Western North Carolina Broadband Project in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm a member of the leadership team, and I have the privilege today of having an opportunity to talk to Stagg Newman. Stagg, if you can please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Stagg Newman. I've been fortunate to work in communications technology for 40 years now, starting at Bell Labs in the late 70s, saw the first fiber optic installation in the U.S. in 79 and the first cellular demonstration that same year. First charts where I showed fiber, we wanted fiber to the customers, I think I made about 1989, 88. We're still not there yet. What I want to do is address the growing digital divide that we need to solve between urban America and where the rest of us live in this series of talks. And today we'll concentrate on the technical requirements and what you as a residential subscriber should aspire to for your service. After my leading development efforts in wireless, optical networking, and DSL technologies, I had the research program at Belcor. I became chief technologist at the FCC and alternated government service with consulting over the years around the world. And I like to say that our challenges in Western North Carolina are very similar to a lot of developing worlds, and we really don't have much better network. And part of that is because we live in the most beautiful parts of the country. Unfortunately, it's very hard to dig in granite rocks, and it's hard to get wireless signals through our beautiful mountains. So that's part of our challenge, the high cost of building broadband in the beautiful areas. So with that as background, I will move into some of the fundamental trends that we need to understand, which drive what we need to aspire to in our networks and our individual services. So at this point, I'm going to start sharing some slides. So what I'd like to talk about is non-urban America and the digital divide, and the need for new fiber and deep business and new business models, deep fiber and new business models. Today, we're just going to concentrate on the overall trends and need, and later we'll talk about the different technology options that can solve this and the business models and innovation we need. Most important is to understand that broadband is on a virtuous cycle. That means that it's going to keep getting better and better, but we have to keep improving our networks to take advantage of that. Today, there are over 100 million U.S. homes with access to 100 megabit per second internet access. Most of those are served by the cable industry. A smaller percent, but are served by fiber to the home by the telephone industry. If you're not on either fiber to the home or a modern cable network, you're in danger of being left behind, and that's what's happening in much of non-urban America. For example, in Buncombe County, about 90% of the residents are on cable networks or fiber to the home. The other 10%, which is over 15,000 households in Buncombe County, are being left behind today. That's true of many of our other counties, even more so in other counties in Western North Carolina. Why does that matter? Well, the reality is the industry is on what's called a virtuous cycle. It's riding the technology development curves of the silicon industry, the optical networking industry. What does that mean? That means that the developers of applications and devices develop new content, new applications, new services. So 20 years ago, our TV sets were these old things that we barely recognize now, and a megabit per second was fine to serve a TV set. Nowadays, people are getting so-called 4D TV sets, and those need 40, 50 times more bandwidth so you can enjoy the large screen and the beautiful pictures. Similarly for computers, nowadays with cloud computing, we go off to the cloud and are using somebody else's applications. That needs high bandwidth. So that trend is not going to stop. In fact, when the FCC, when I was there in 99, we defined the minimum broadband acceptable speed as 256 kilobits per second. 10 years later, it was 4 megabits per second. In 2015, the FCC defined it as 25 megabits per second. We anticipate this year that the FCC will raise that to 100 megabits per second. So roughly speaking, it goes up by a factor of 10 every decade. That's driven by the new applications, which drive user demand, which drives network improvements. And that's driving a doubling in performance every 2 to 3 years. The challenge is, how do you provide that performance? Some networks are what we call future-proof, and other networks aren't. So what we found is that telco, copper technology, so-called DSL, and conventional large site cellular networks such as 3G and even a lot of the 4G are hitting the limits of technology. How do you solve that? Well, one way is deep fiber. Another way is 5G. But 5G actually requires deep fiber because it requires at least 10 times more cell sites per square mile than we have in most of non-urban America. So the problem in non-urban America is driving that fiber deeper is expensive. As you can see in that chart, 90% of America can be served by a certain cost factor within a factor of 2. However, that next 10%, which covers much of Western North Carolina, may cost as much as 10 to 20 times is what it would cost to build in a urban America. And then the people who live in the most remote parts of the United States, it may cost 100 times as much. So our challenge is, how do we get those parts of Western North Carolina on an evolvable network that's future-proof so that we all participate in the broadband virtual cycle and don't get left behind in the digital evolution? That perspective is what drove us to develop the technical requirements in the Buncombe County RFP. So Buncombe County just issued an RFP to ask and find broadband service providers that would come in and fill out the over 10% of our county that's not well served today. That RFP's out there. We've had some responses. All responses are due by around the end of February, and at that point, hopefully we'll be in serious discussions with one or more companies that will help build out our broadband network. As a slight aside, I should say in a recent federal auction, we did have Charter, who serves much of our county with cable networks, win funding to build out in 2 of the more remote areas of the county. But the rest of the county was not eligible for the federal funding, so we still have that 15,000 homes or so that we have to solve the problem. So what did we set for technical requirements and why? Because that's what users should aspire to. We said today, because we want to be at least at parity with urban America, that it should be 100 megabit per second down and 10 megabit per second up. Commercial needs much more symmetric speed, so we said 100 megabits each way. So that is so that our area stays pace with urban America and can enjoy the same devices and applications at their full potential. And today that can be realized with a modern cable network or with a fiber network. So in parts of Western North Carolina, that's provided by, say, Charter or Morris Broadband on the cable side, River Street, French Broad Electric, and some places, but very few places, AT&T is providing that type of fiber network. We, in the RFP, realized that you can't necessarily get there immediately, so we said we would entertain requirements of 25 by 3 and commercial of 25 by 25. but they have to show us an evolution plan. I'll get to in a minute. The next requirement is latency. That's the delay so that you can do two-way services. That's become far more important in the COVID-19 era, where we want to work from home, where we, so anyway, let me say that's far more important when we need to work from home, when we need to do telemedicine, remote education, et cetera. So, and that latency is something that's going to need to keep coming down over time. We want anybody who responds to tell us how they measure the performance, because we're interested in reality, not promises. We want technical sustainability. That is, they've got to meet this goal of improving the service every 2 to 3 years by doubling the performance, and similarly bringing the latency down. And importantly, another thing that is frequently hidden in service provider plans is, what is the usage caps? People ideally want unlimited usage, but some service providers promise unlimited usage, but then they deprioritize your traffic once you hit a certain cap. And after that, you get very poor performance. So it's important that users are, the service providers are very upfront with what the usage requirements are.
Stagg, what is an example of the geographic problem related to broadband in Western North Carolina?
Okay, so I just showed you the problem sort of at the micro level where I live, where the cable network did not get built out 20 years ago or so, and therefore the 20% or so of the homes not on the cable network do not have access to modern broadband services. Charter has extended that a little, but there's still many homes out here without service. And AT&T has indicated they have no plans to modernize. And that's the problem we have throughout Western North Carolina, to greater or lesser extent, depending on the county you live. And Buncombe County, the most urban county in Western North Carolina, actually has a surprising amount of unserved areas. We estimate it's around 15,000 households of our 125,000. The map in front of you basically shows that. All those orange areas are the holes in our Swiss cheese network of good broadband. So you can actually go to the website listed there and blow that up and see whether your home is served or not served. And you know, what we're hoping to do in Buncombe County is find service providers who will put up their hand and say, hey, we'd like to work with the county. If the county will make assets available and help us with the capital development to build out your network. So that's the dialogue that's going on in Buncombe County. I know of a similar dialogue in Haywood County and Polk County. And it's that type of public-private partnership that we've got to work on to solve the problem. So I think that's a good way to wrap this up, is to be part of the ongoing digital evolution in America and be on the right side of the digital divide. We in Western North Carolina, one of the highest cost areas to build anywhere in the world, have got to partner with the service providers through both financial and other ways to fill in the holes in our Swiss cheese network. Thanks, Mark.